The alarm screamed through the corridors of the patrol ship Horizon's Edge, and Jake Morrison was already moving. His boots hit the metal floor in rhythm with his heartbeat as he ran toward the bridge. 3 years into the war with the Vakari, and distress signals still made his blood run cold. "What have we got?" Jake asked as he burst onto the bridge. Commander Phillips didn't look up from his display. Vakari scout vessel, damaged, drifting into the neutral zone. Jake moved closer to the view screen. The alien ship was small, maybe a quarter the size of their patrol vessel. Scorch marks covered its hull and atmosphere was venting from at least 3 breaches. It tumbled slowly through space like a dying bird. "Life signs?" Jake asked. Philip's jaw tightened. 2, both weak. 1 adult, 1 juvenile. He turned to face Jake and his expression was hard as steel. "We're moving on. Not our problem." Something twisted in Jake's gut. "Sir, there's a kid on that ship." "There's an enemy on that ship," Phillips corrected. 2 enemies. "We have orders, Lieutenant. No engagement with damaged Vakari vessels unless they pose a direct threat." Jake stared at the tumbling ship on the screen. His scanner showed the life signs flickering, fading. Minutes, maybe less. He'd been a combat medic for 5 years, long before the war started. He'd taken an oath, save lives, all lives. "I'm going over there," Jake said quietly. The bridge went silent. Every crew member turned to look at him. "That's a direct violation of engagement protocol," Phillips said, his voice dropping to a dangerous level. "I will have you court-martialed, Morrison. I will end your career." Jake was already moving toward the airlock. "Then you'll have to court-martial me, sir. I can't watch a kid die when I can do something about it." He didn't wait for permission, didn't wait for backup. Jake suited up in the fastest equipment check of his life, grabbed his medical kit, and cycled through the airlock before Phillips could send security to stop him. The void of space was silent and cold. Jake's thruster pack fired in short bursts as he crossed the distance between ships. Up close, the damage to the Vakari vessel was worse than he'd thought. The metal was twisted, melted in places. Whatever had hit them had hit hard. He found an intact airlock and overrode it with his military codes. The Vakari and humans had been fighting long enough that both sides had learned to crack each other's systems. The door hissed open and Jake pulled himself inside. The interior was dark except for emergency lighting that pulsed red. The air was thin, contaminated with smoke and something else. Something chemical that made Jake's nose burn even through his helmet filters. He followed his scanner deeper into the ship. He found them in what looked like a small cabin. The adult Vakari was pinned beneath a collapsed bulkhead, her body broken in ways that made Jake's medical training scream. But it was her appearance that made him stop for just a moment. The Vakari were reptilian, everyone knew that. But seeing one up close was different. Her scales were iridescent, shifting colors even as he watched. Right now they were flashing between orange and purple, rapid and chaotic. Her face was angular with large eyes that tracked his movement. When she saw him, saw his human suit, those eyes widened. "Please," she said, and Jake's translator implant caught the word in accented English. "Please, my daughter." Jake's eyes followed her gaze. A small figure huddled in the corner, maybe 3 feet tall. The child had the same scaled skin as her mother. But right now those scales were flickering white and red, white and red. Fear colors, Jake realized. Pure terror. He moved toward the child slowly, hands raised. "It's okay," he said, knowing she probably couldn't understand. "I'm here to help." The mother spoke again, her voice weaker now. Blood, dark blue blood, was pooling beneath the debris. "Kira, her name..." "Kira." Jake knelt beside the mother first. His scanner showed him what he already knew from looking at her. Crushed spine. Massive internal bleeding. Punctured organs he didn't even have names for. He had maybe enough time to stabilize one person. Maybe. "I can try to get you out," Jake said, even though they both knew it was a lie. The Vakari woman's scales shifted to a deep, sad blue. "No time, you know." "I know." She reached out one clawed hand toward her daughter. "Take Kira, please, take her." "I can't just take her," Jake said. "She's a child. She needs her mother. She needs to live." The woman's scales flashed bright, desperate orange. "They attack us. Other humans. They will come back. She will die here." Her hand grabbed Jake's arm with surprising strength. "You save her. Promise me." The ship shuddered around them. Something was failing. Systems dying one by one. Jake looked at the small child huddled in the corner, then back at the dying mother. Every protocol said leave them both. Every regulation said this was enemy territory, enemy combatants. But Jake's oath, the oath he'd taken so long ago, said something different. I promise, he said. The mother's scales shifted to a pale, peaceful green for just a moment. Thank you, human. Thank you. Then her expression changed, hardened. But know this. I will find you. If I survive, I will find the one who took my Kira. I will hunt you across stars. It should have sounded like a threat, but Jake heard it for what it was. A promise. A mother's promise. He moved to the child. She pressed herself against the wall, scales flashing panic white. Jake kept his movements slow, gentle. He reached out his hand. Kira, he said softly. Your mother asked me to help you. Will you let me help you? The child looked at her mother. The woman spoke in Vakari, words Jake's implant couldn't quite catch, but whatever she said, it worked. Kira's scales stopped flickering quite so fast. She reached out one small clawed hand and took Jake's. Her hand was warm, warmer than human. Her scales were smooth under his gloved fingers. Jake picked her up carefully. She was lighter than he expected. She buried her face against his shoulder and he felt her trembling. I'll keep her safe, Jake said to the mother. The woman's eyes were already dimming. Her name is Kira, she whispered again. Tell her I loved her. Jake carried Kira to the airlock. Behind them, the ship gave a terrible groan as another system failed. He didn't look back. Couldn't look back. The crossing back to Horizon's edge seemed to take forever. Kira clung to him, her small hands gripping his suit. Through his helmet, he could hear her making small sounds, whimpering noises that didn't need translation. The airlock of his ship opened, and Jake pulled them both inside. The moment the atmosphere stabilized, he removed his helmet. The first thing he saw was Commander Phillips standing there, face red with fury, security guards flanking him. What the hell have you done, Morrison? Phillips shouted. Jake gently set Kira down but kept one hand on her shoulder. She pressed against his leg, scales still flickering fear-white. I saved a child, sir, Jake said simply. You brought an enemy combatant onto this ship. Avakari. Do you have any idea what you've done? I know exactly what I've done. Jake looked down at Kira. Her large eyes stared up at him and her scales were starting to show hints of other colors now, confusion yellow mixing with the white fear. Her mother was dying. The ship was failing. I made a choice. A choice that will cost you your career, Phillips said. Security, take the alien to the holding cells. Take Morrison to the brig. 2 guards moved forward. The moment they reached for Kira, she made a sound Jake had never heard before. A high-pitched trill of absolute terror. Her scales flashed so bright white they almost glowed. She wrapped her arms around Jake's leg and wouldn't let go. Wait, Jake said. He knelt down to Kira's level. It's okay. These people won't hurt you. I won't let them. Kira looked at him with those huge alien eyes. Then she said something in her language, one word repeated over and over. Jake's implant finally caught it and translated. Mother, mother, mother. Jake felt something break in his chest. This small creature, this child who should have been his enemy, had just lost everything. Her mother, her home, her entire world. And now she was surrounded by aliens who looked at her like she was a thing, not a person. I've got her, Jake said firmly. He picked Kira up again. She wrapped her arms around his neck. If you're taking me to the brig, fine. But she comes with me. She's traumatized and injured, and she's a child. I'm a medic. I'm all she has right now. Phillips looked like he wanted to argue. Then he looked at Kira, really looked at her, and something shifted in his expression. Just for a moment, Jake saw the man remember he was human. Fine, Phillips said coldly. You and the alien together in the brig. But Morrison, the moment we reach base, you're done. Court-martial. Dishonorable discharge. And that thing is going to military intelligence. Her name is Kira, Jake said quietly. He carried her to the brig. The cell was small, just a cot and a toilet and nothing else. But it was warm and it was safe. Jake sat on the cot with Kira in his lap. She was still trembling, still making those small sounds of distress. It's okay, Jake whispered. Even though it wasn't okay. Even though nothing would be okay again. I've got you. You're safe now. Kira's scales slowly, very slowly, began to shift from pure white to a pale blue-green. Her trembling eased just a little. And then, exhausted beyond measure, the small alien child fell asleep against Jake's chest. Jake sat there in the dim cell, holding an enemy's child, and wondered what he'd just started. Commander Syleth woke to pain and the smell of medical chemicals. Her eyes opened slowly, struggling to focus on the ceiling above her. White metal. Vakari Medical Facility. She was alive. Her first thought was of Kira. Her second thought was also of Kira. Every thought after that was Kira. Kira, until she tried to sit up and the pain drove everything else from her mind. Commander, please remain still. A medical officer approached, his scales showing professional concern in muted green patterns. My daughter, Syleth rasped. Where is my daughter? The medic's scales shifted to sympathetic purple. That was all the answer Syleth needed. She grabbed his arm with whatever strength she had left. Tell me, she demanded. We found your ship 3 days ago, the medic said carefully. You were the only survivor. We searched the surrounding space. No other life pods. No debris with DNA markers. Commander, I'm sorry, but your daughter... No. Syleth's scales flashed denial red, bright and absolute. No, she's alive. I would know. A mother knows. The medic said nothing. His scales showed the color of someone dealing with grief-stricken patients. He'd seen this before, denial. The first stage, but Syleth wasn't in denial. Deep in her biology, in the bond that connected Vakari mothers to their children, she felt something. A pull, a presence. Faint, distant, but there. Kira was alive. I need ship records, Syleth said. Communications, sensor logs, everything. Commander, you need to heal. Your injuries. Syleth looked down at herself for the first time. Her chest was covered in cybernetic mesh, silver metal fused with her scales. Her left arm had been rebuilt from the elbow down. Tubes and wires connected her to machines that hummed and beeped. How bad? She asked. You should have died, the medic said honestly. Your spine was crushed. 3 major organs were destroyed. You were clinically dead for 8 minutes. We rebuilt what we could, replaced what we couldn't. You'll live, but you'll never be the same. Syleth's scales rippled with determination orange. Good, then I'll be better than I was. Now get me those records. It took her 2 weeks to heal enough to access the ship's data herself. What she found made her scales flash through emotion so fast they appeared white. A human patrol ship had been in the sector. The horizon's edge. It had been close enough to detect her ship's distress signal, and according to the sensor log she'd managed to pull from her scout ship's backup systems, someone had crossed from that human ship to hers. Someone had boarded her dying vessel. Someone had been there when she lost consciousness. Someone had taken Kira. Syleth pulled up everything she could find about the horizon's edge. Human military vessel. Standard patrol assignment. Nothing special. But then she found something interesting. 2 weeks after the incident, Lieutenant Jake Morrison had been court-martialed for violating engagement protocols. Unauthorized boarding of an enemy vessel. She stared at the human's file image. Brown hair, blue eyes. Young for a soldier, maybe 28 cycles, a medic. And according to the official records, he'd been dishonorably discharged and imprisoned. But that wasn't the full story. Syleth had contacts, information networks that transcended the war. She paid a fortune in credits to an information broker who operated in neutral space. What she learned made everything clear. Jake Morrison had saved a Vakari child, had brought her aboard his ship, had been arrested for it. But before he could be properly imprisoned, he'd escaped. And he'd taken the child with him. Kira was alive. A human had her. A human named Jake Morrison. Syleth stood in the medical bay, still connected to healing machines, and made her decision. She pulled out the tubes and wires, ignoring the alarms that immediately started screaming. Medical staff rushed in, but she was already moving. Commander, you can't... I'm leaving, Syleth stated. Official medical discharge. Sign the papers or I'll leave without them. She found her second-in-command, a scarred warrior named Vex, waiting outside the facility. He took one look at her, at the determination in her scale patterns, and nodded. Where are we going, Commander? Vex asked. To find my daughter, Syleth said. Gather the team. Everyone who served with me on the 3rd Fleet who's willing to go rogue. Vex's scales showed surprise yellow. Rogue? Commander, if we abandon our posts, then we abandon them. Syleth's scales flashed maternal orange, a color so bright it hurt to look at. My daughter is alive. A human has her. I'm going to find them both. Meanwhile, across the border in human space, Jake was learning exactly how hard it was to hide with an alien child. Kira needed things, special things. Her biology wasn't like human biology at all. The first time she got sick, Jake had panicked. Her scales had turned gray, dull, and lifeless. She'd stopped eating. She'd barely moved. A black market xenologist named Dr. Chen had examined her in a dingy clinic on a border colony. The woman had been drunk but competent. She needs ultraviolet light, Dr. Chen had said. Specific wavelength. And these nutrients. She'd scrawled a list. But that's not the real problem. What's the real problem? Jake had asked, holding Kira's small hand. The real problem is she needs her mother. Vakari biology is complex. Mothers and children share pheromonal bonds, chemical connections. Without regular contact with her mother, this kid will die. 3 months, maybe 4 if you're lucky. Jake had felt his world collapse. There has to be another way. Synthetic pheromones. I can make them. But they're expensive and they're temporary. You're looking at buying yourself time, not a solution. Jake had paid everything he had. Every credit from his military service. Everything. Dr. Chen had given him bottles of clear liquid that smelled like nothing to his human nose but made Kira's scales brighten just a little when she inhaled the scent. Now, 60 days later, Jake was running out of money and running out of time. He'd moved from colony to colony, staying ahead of the military police who were definitely looking for him. Kira stayed close to him always, her small hand in his. She'd started to trust him. That was the beautiful and terrible part. She called him Jaka in her language. She'd stopped flinching when he moved quickly. Her scales showed calm blue-green when she looked at him now, but she was forgetting. Sometimes she'd draw pictures of her mother, the scales rendered in careful crayon strokes, but the pictures were getting less detailed. Vaguer. She'd sit with the drawings and her scales would show confused yellow, like she knew she should remember something but couldn't quite grasp it. Jake would watch her and feel guilt eat him alive. He'd saved her life but stolen her memories. He'd kept her alive but separated her from her mother. Nothing about this was right. They were hiding in a rundown apartment on a colony called New Seattle when Jake made his decision. Kira was sleeping on the couch, curled up small, her scales gray again. The synthetic pheromones were losing effectiveness. Jake pulled up his communication system. It took him hours to figure out how to route a message into Vakari space without it being traced. He used civilian networks, refugee channels, anything he could find that might reach the right person. Finally, he recorded a message. His hands shook as he activated the camera. My name is Jake Morrison. I'm a human medic. 60 days ago, I found a Vakari scout ship that had been damaged. There was a woman on that ship. Commander Silith. She was dying. She asked me to save her daughter. So I did. Jake turned the camera toward Kira. She stirred in her sleep, scales flickering through dream colors. Her name is Kira. She's alive, but she's sick. She needs her mother. I know you probably think I kidnapped her. I know you probably want to kill me. Maybe you should. But please, if you're alive, if you're out there, she needs you. I'll bring her to you. Just tell me where. He sent the message to every Vakari frequency he could find. Then he sat back and waited, watching Kira breathe, wondering if he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life. The message reached Scylla 3 days later on a frontier world called Kesek 4. She was interrogating human prisoners, trying to find any information about Jake Morrison's location. When her communication officer brought her the message, her scales went completely still. She watched the video 7 times. Watched this human, this Jake Morrison, show her daughter. Watched Kira sleep, saw how sick she looked, how gray her scales had become. And she saw something else. She saw how Jake looked at her daughter. Not like a prisoner. Not like a tool or a weapon. He looked at Kira like she was precious. It could be a trap, Vex said quietly. Military intelligence. They could be using the child as bait. Sylith studied Jake's face in the video. She saw exhaustion. She saw fear. And she saw something that looked like desperate hope. It's not a trap, Sylith said. Look at him. Look at how he protects her. That's real. Then what do we do? Sylith composed a response. She kept it short, direct. Meridian outpost. 30 days. Come alone. If I suspect a trap, your daughter dies. It was a lie. She would never harm Kira. But Jake Morrison didn't know that. She sent the message and began preparing. 30 days to reach Meridian. 30 days for everything to go right or wrong. But the message didn't stay secret. Both human and Vakari military intelligence intercepted the communications. Both sides scrambled their forces. In a command center on Earth, a general looked at Jake Morrison's file and made a decision. Find him. Bring him in. The alien, too. We can use this. In a war room in Vakari space, a council member hissed in anger. Meridian Outpost hung in space like a rusty crown. It was built from the remains of 3 different ships and a mining station, all welded together over decades into something that barely passed for habitable. Humans, Vakari, and a dozen other species lived there in an uneasy balance. The station survived because everyone needed it. Smugglers needed a place to trade. Refugees needed a place to hide. And people on both sides of the war needed a place where the fighting stopped, even if just for a moment. The station's administrator was a woman named Kate Vasquez. She'd been running Meridian for 20 years, maintaining its neutral status through a combination of threats, bribery, and sheer stubbornness. She had exactly 3 rules: no weapons fire inside the station, no military raids while ships were docked, and no questions about anyone's past. Kate was reviewing supply manifest when her communication officer knocked on her office door. "We've got a situation," the officer said. Kate looked up. "What kind of situation?" "A human just docked, traveling alone with a Vakari child, and there's a Vakari warship requesting permission to dock. Says they're here to meet them." Kate's eyes narrowed. "Just one human and one child?" "Yes, ma'am." The human matches the description of Jake Morrison, the one from the broadcasts. Kate had seen those broadcasts. Everyone had. The human medic who saved an enemy child. The Vakari commander who abandoned her post to find her daughter. It was the kind of story that made people uncomfortable because it made them think, and thinking was dangerous during wartime. "And let me guess," Kate said. "Both human and Vakari fleets are on their way here too." The officer nodded grimly. "Multiple ships on approach. Military vessels from both sides. They'll be here within hours." Kate stood up and grabbed her jacket. "Wonderful. Tell the human and the Vakari they can meet in the Garden Dome. And start lockdown protocols. This is about to get messy." Jake carried Kira through Meridian's corridors. She was so light now. Too light. Her scales were dull gray and she barely lifted her head from his shoulder. The synthetic pheromones had stopped working 3 days ago. He'd pushed their ship as hard as he could to get here in time. "We're almost there," he whispered to her. "Your mother is waiting. Just a little longer." Kira made a small sound, barely audible. Her scales flickered weakly, confusion yellow mixing with sick gray. The Garden Dome was the only beautiful place on Meridian. Some long ago resident had filled it with plants from a dozen worlds, trees with silver leaves, flowers that glowed in the dark, grass that grew in spiral patterns. The dome itself was transparent, showing the stars beyond. Jake stepped into the garden and stopped. She was already there. Commander Silith stood on the far side of the dome 20 feet away. She was taller than Jake expected, maybe 6.5 feet. Her scales were deep blue-green, the color of deep water. But parts of her body were different now. Cybernetic mesh covered her chest and ribs. Her left arm gleamed with metal components. She'd been rebuilt, Jake realized. She'd survived injuries that should have killed her. Their eyes met across the garden. Hers were large, golden, reptilian. They fixed on Kira with an intensity that made Jake's breath catch. "You took my daughter," Silith said. Her English was perfect now, unaccented. She'd learned his language. Probably spent every day of the last 60 days learning everything about humans she could. "I saved her," Jake replied. His arms tightened protectively around Kira. "You were dying. You asked me to." Silith's scales flashed angry red. "You stole her from her people. From her home. From everything she knew. I kept her alive when your people would have let her die in that wreckage." Jake's voice cracked slightly. "When my people wanted to study her, dissect her. I've spent 60 days running, hiding, keeping her safe. Also, I could give her back to you." "Give her back?" Silith's scales shifted to disbelief yellow. "You speak as if she is an object." "A thing to be passed around." "That's not what I meant," Jake said. "I meant—" Kira stirred in his arms. She lifted her head slowly, her dull eyes struggling to focus. She looked at Silith and something happened. Something chemical and biological and beyond Jake's understanding. Kira's scales began to change. The gray faded. Color flooded back into her skin, vibrant yellow-green. The color of recognition. The color of home. She reached out one small hand toward Silith. "Mama," Kira whispered in Vakari. Just one word, but it carried everything. Sylith moved. She crossed the 20 feet in 3 powerful strides. Her scales flashed through a dozen emotions, maternal orange so bright it hurt to look at. She took Kira from Jake's arms, and the moment mother and child touched, they both began to glow. Bioluminescence. Jake had read about it in the xenobiology texts he'd studied over the past weeks. Vakari mothers and children synchronized their bioelectric fields when reunited. It was instinct. Biology. Love made visible. Sylith held Kira close, and the child wrapped her arms around her mother's neck. Both of them were crying, though Vakari tears were different from human tears, clearer, somehow brighter. Their scales pulsed in perfect rhythm, colors flowing across both their bodies in waves. Yellow-green joy, blue-green relief. Orange love. Jake stepped back. His job was done. He'd kept his promise. Kira was home, safe in her mother's arms. Whatever happened to him now didn't matter. Then the shooting started. The Garden Dome's entrance exploded inward. Human soldiers poured through, weapons raised. Commander Phillips led them, his face hard. "Jake Morrison, you're under arrest," Phillips shouted. "Step away from the alien." Before Jake could respond, the opposite entrance exploded. Vakari shock troops burst in, their weapons charging with high-pitched whines. A Vakari officer pointed at Sylith. "Commander Sylith, you are ordered to stand down. You and your team are wanted for desertion and treason." Jake and Sylith turned to look at each other. Both groups of soldiers were advancing. The Garden Dome had become a trap. Kate Vasquez's voice suddenly boomed through every speaker in the dome. "Everyone stop right there." The soldiers hesitated. Kate appeared on the display screens positioned around the garden. "This is my station," Kate said coldly. "My rules, and you're all violating them." She pressed a button. Heavy blast doors slammed down over both entrances, sealing them. The soldiers on the other side pounded on the metal, but it didn't budge. "I'm locking down this dome. You 4 inside have 30 minutes to figure out your situation. After that, I'm venting the atmosphere and we'll see who survives vacuum." "You can't do that," Phillips shouted at the nearest screen. "I absolutely can," Kate replied. "This is neutral territory. You brought military forces here. You violated my station's safety. So here's what's going to happen. Morrison and Commander Sylith are going to talk. They're going to decide what happens next, and the rest of you are going to wait outside until they do. If you don't like it, leave my station and don't come back." The screens went dark. Jake looked at Sylith. She was still holding Kira, but now a Vakari warrior stood beside her. Male, heavily scarred, his scales showing combat patterns. This must be Vex, her second in command. "She's bluffing," Vex said. "She won't actually vent the atmosphere." "She's not bluffing," Jake said. "I've heard stories about Kate Vasquez. She once spaced an entire gang for starting a firefight in her docking bay. She doesn't bluff." Sylith's scales shifted to thoughtful purple. She looked down at Kira, who was already looking healthier in her arms, scales bright and vibrant. Then she looked at Jake. "You could have hurt her," Sylith said quietly. "You could have let her die. You could have given her to your military, but you chose to protect her." "She's a child," Jake said simply. "That's what you do with children. You protect them." "Most soldiers would not agree with you." "Then maybe most soldiers are wrong." Sylith's scales rippled with complex emotions. "My people will not forgive this. I abandoned my post. I took my team on a personal mission during wartime. They want me executed." "My people aren't happy with me either," Jake said. "I violated direct orders. I stole enemy property, as they call Kira. I'm looking at life in prison if I'm lucky." They stood in silence for a moment. Kira looked between them, her scales showing confusion yellow. In her simple understanding, she had 2 protectors now. The mother who birthed her and the human who saved her. Why were they on different sides? "We have 18 minutes left," Vex said, checking his chronometer. Jake walked closer to Sylith, slowly, hands visible. She tensed but didn't back away. He looked at Kira, and the little girl reached out to touch his face with one small hand. "Jaka," she said softly. Sylith's scales flashed surprise yellow. "She has a name for you." "She's been with me for 60 days, Jake said. "We've gotten close. You cared for her, of course I did. She's a good kid. She likes drawing. She hums when she's happy. She gets scared during thunderstorms. She likes sweet foods more than savory." Jake's eyes met Sylith's. "I'm going to miss her." Sylith studied him for a long moment. Then her scales shifted to decision orange. "What if you didn't have to?" "What?" What if neither of us had to lose her? Syleth adjusted Kira in her arms. What if we made them stop? Stop what? The lockdown? The war, Syleth said. Jake stared at her. We can't stop the war. We're just two soldiers. Two soldiers with a story that everyone is watching. Syleth gestured at the dome walls. Our message reached both our people. They know what... The broadcast changed everything and nothing all at once. Wars don't end because of single moments, no matter how powerful. But they can pause. They can shift. And in the days after Jake and Syleth stood together at Meridian Outpost, something fundamental shifted in the space between human and Vakari territories. Jake and Syleth were both arrested, as expected, but the arrests were different now. Gentler. The guards who took Jake into custody treated him with something approaching respect. One young soldier even asked for his autograph, then looked embarrassed about it. They held him in a detention facility on a border station called Gateway 7. It wasn't like the brig on the horizon's edge. He had a real room with a window showing stars. They brought him decent food. Nobody threatened him. Commander Phillips came to visit on the third day. He sat across from Jake in the small interview room and was quiet for a long moment. I owe you an apology, Phillips finally said. Jake looked up in surprise. Sir, I called you a traitor. I said you'd violated everything we stood for as soldiers. Phillips ran a hand through his gray hair. But I watched that broadcast. I watched it a dozen times, and I realized something. You didn't betray what we stand for. You embodied it. We're supposed to protect the innocent. All innocent, not just human ones. I appreciate that, sir, Jake said carefully, but I still violated direct orders. You did, Phillips agreed, and there will be consequences. But they won't be what I originally wanted. I've been talking to people, important people, the kind who make decisions above my pay grade. They're not happy about any of this, but they're also not stupid. They've seen the public reaction. Jake leaned forward. What public reaction? Phillips pulled out a tablet and slid it across the table. See for yourself. Jake scrolled through the news feeds. The broadcast had gone viral, not just among military personnel but civilians. Commentators were debating it on every channel. Some called Jake a traitor, but many more were calling him a hero. There were protests. Humans gathering in cities across the colonies holding signs. Peace for Kira. If he can save them, why are we killing them? And the war, and it wasn't just humans. According to the reports, there were similar movements in Vakari space. Soldiers questioning orders. Citizens demanding to know why they were fighting. One broadcast did all this? Jake asked, stunned. One story, Phillips corrected. People are tired of the war, Jake. They've been tired for a long time, but nobody wanted to be the first to say it. You and that Vakari commander, you gave them permission to speak up. What happens now? Phillips stood. Now? Politicians get involved. Diplomats, people who like to talk in circles. But there's going to be a hearing. Public. Both sides have agreed to it. You and Commander Syleth will testify about what happened. After that, he shrugged. We'll see. After Phillips left, Jake sat alone with the tablet reading through the reactions. He found footage from Vakari space translated into English. Vakari citizens were gathering too, their scales showing colors of uncertainty and hope mixed together. One video showed a Vakari mother holding her child, speaking to a camera. If humans can save our children, maybe we should stop killing their children. It was simple, almost naive. But sometimes the simplest truths were the most powerful. Meanwhile, in Vakari detention on the planet Korath Prime, Syleth faced her own reckoning. The council had called her before them to answer for her actions, abandoning her post, taking military resources for personal use, fraternizing with the enemy. But like Jake, her detention was different than expected. They gave her a comfortable room. They allowed Kira to stay with her. And when the guards looked at her, their scales showed respect green mixed with uncertain yellow. Vex came to see her every day. On the 5th day, he brought news. The council is divided, he told her. Half want you executed for treason. The other half want you decorated for bringing attention to the war's cost. What do you think they'll do? Syleth asked. Kira played on the floor nearby, drawing pictures of the garden dome on Meridian. I think they'll do what's politically safe, Vex said, which means they'll wait to see public opinion. And right now, public opinion is mostly on your side. Mostly? There are those who say you shamed our military. That you showed weakness by working with a human. Vex's scales showed his own opinion in determined orange, but more say you showed strength. That you crossed enemy lines alone to save your child. That the human's actions proved not all of them are monsters. Syleth looked at Kira. Her daughter was healthy again, scales bright and vibrant. She hummed while she drew, the sound of a happy child. That's all Syleth had wanted. Her daughter, alive and happy. They're planning a hearing, Vex continued. Public testimony. You and the human, Jake Morrison. They want both sides of the story. When? 2 weeks. On Meridian Outpost. Neutral ground. Syleth's scales flickered with surprise. They agreed to that? Both governments did. I think they realize this is bigger than military law now. This is about public perception. About whether the war continues or not. After Vex left, Syleth sat with Kira and helped her with her drawing. The little girl had drawn 3 figures, herself, Syleth, and Jake. They were all holding hands in the picture. You like Jaka? Syleth observed. Kira nodded enthusiastically, her scales showing happy yellow. Jaka saved me. Jaka good. Yes, Syleth said softly. Jaka is good. She thought about Jake Morrison. This human who had every reason to let her daughter die but chose not to. Who'd risked his career, his freedom, his life to keep a promise to a dying enemy. In Vakari culture, such honor was rare even among their own people. The 2 weeks passed slowly. Jake spent his time reading, exercising, and thinking about what he would say at the hearing. They'd assigned him a lawyer, a sharp woman named Lisa Park who specialized in military law. Your case is unprecedented, Lisa told him during one of their meetings. Technically, you violated multiple regulations, but the public support is overwhelming. I think we can argue you acted according to a higher moral code. I just did what was right, Jake said. That's exactly what you'll tell them, Lisa replied. No politics. No grand statements. Just the truth. You saw a child who needed help and you helped her. The day of the hearing arrived. Jake was transported to Meridian Outpost under heavy guard. The station's main assembly hall had been converted into a hearing chamber. Humans sat on one side, Vakari on the other. Cameras from both civilizations recorded everything. Jake entered first. The room went quiet. He wore his military dress uniform, though he had no rank insignia anymore. He took his seat at the defendant's table. Then Syleth entered with Kira. The Vakari wore formal armor, deep blue with silver accents. Kira stayed close to her mother, her small hand gripping Syleth's larger one. They sat at a separate table. Kira saw Jake and her scales lit up bright yellow-green. She waved at him and Jake couldn't help but smile and wave back. That small gesture was captured by every camera in the room. The hearing was presided over by a joint panel. 3 humans and 3 Vakari, all high-ranking officials. The senior human judge, a stern man named Gregory Cole, spoke first. We are here to examine the incident that occurred 63 days ago in Sector 7-9. Lieutenant Jake Morrison is charged with violating military protocol, unauthorized boarding of an enemy vessel, and theft of enemy property. Commander Syleth is charged with abandoning her post and unauthorized use of military resources. Both parties have become the center of significant public attention. This hearing will determine their fate and perhaps shed light on larger questions about this conflict. They called Jake to testify first. He walked to the stand and swore to tell the truth. Then they began asking questions. Lieutenant Morrison, explain your actions on the day in question, Judge Cole said. Jake took a breath and told the story. He described the distress signal, Philip's orders to ignore it, his decision to go anyway, finding Syleth and Kira, the promise he made. You had no obligation to this enemy combatant, one of the Vakari judges said. Why risk yourself? Because she was dying and asking me to save her child, Jake said simply. I'm a medic. My job is to save lives. I couldn't just watch a child die when I could do something about it. Even an enemy child. She wasn't an enemy. She was a scared little girl who'd just lost everything. I saw a child who needed help. That's all. They questioned him for hours. About his motives. About his time with Kira. About his decision to return her. Jake answered everything honestly. He didn't try to make himself sound heroic. He just told the truth. Then they called Syleth. She approached the stand with Kira at her side. The judges allowed the child to stay with her mother. Commander Syleth, you abandoned your military duties to search for your daughter, Judge Cole said. Do you deny this? I do not deny it, Silith replied, her English flawless. I would do it again. You worked with an enemy. Communicated with him. Met with him on neutral ground, I did. Because he had my daughter. Because she was dying without me. Silith's scales showed fierce maternal orange. I am a soldier, yes. But I am a mother first. My duty to my child comes before my duty to the state. One of the Vakari judges leaned forward. You believe maternal duty supersedes military duty? I believe any parent would do what I did. Human or Vakari? Silith looked. The verdict came on a Tuesday morning. Jake was sitting in his detention room, staring out at the stars, when Lisa Park arrived with news written all over her face. They reached a decision, she said. Jake stood. And you're being pardoned. Full reinstatement of rank if you want it, with commendation for extraordinary humanitarian action. Lisa smiled. Congratulations, Lieutenant. You're officially a hero. Jake sat back down, suddenly feeling weak. What about Silith? Similar outcome. The Vakari Council stripped her of her military command, but they're not executing her. They're calling it an honorable discharge. She gets to keep her pension and her freedom. Lisa hesitated. There's more. Both governments have agreed to preliminary peace talks. Not surrender, not even a full ceasefire yet. But talks, real negotiations for the first time in 3 years. Because of the hearing, because of you and Silith, because of Kira. Lisa sat down across from him. The public pressure was too much. Humans don't want to fight people who save our enemies' children. Vakari don't want to fight people their commanders call honorable. Politicians on both sides realized they couldn't keep selling the war when the most famous story in the galaxy is about enemies working together. Jake felt something break loose in his chest. Relief, maybe, or hope. When do I get released? Today, right now, actually. You're free to go. They processed him out within an hour. Someone had brought his personal belongings from storage. Someone else had prepared his old uniform with his lieutenant's insignia restored. Jake dressed slowly, still not quite believing it was real. When he stepped out of the detention center, he found a crowd waiting. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed. People held signs thanking him. It was overwhelming. Security helped him through to a waiting transport. As he climbed inside, someone called his name. Jake turned to see Commander Phillips standing there. Permission to come aboard? Phillips asked. Jake nodded and Phillips climbed into the transport. They sat in silence as it lifted off. I thought I should tell you personally, Phillips finally said. The Horizon's Edge needs a new chief medical officer. Your old position. If you want it, you're offering me my job back? I'm offering you the chance to keep serving. If you want it, but I'll understand if you don't after everything that happened. I want it, Jake said immediately. I'm a medic. It's what I do, Phillips smiled. Good, we ship out in 2 weeks. He hesitated. There's something else. The preliminary peace talks are being held on Meridian Outpost. Kate Vasquez insisted on it, and both sides agreed. They want you there. As a witness. As a symbol. You and Commander Silith both. I'll be there, Jake said. The transport took him to temporary quarters on Gateway 7. He had 2 weeks before shipping out. 2 weeks to process everything that had happened. 2 weeks to figure out what came next. He spent the first few days dealing with the media attention. It was strange being famous. Everywhere he went, people recognized him. Some thanked him. Some wanted autographs. Some just wanted to shake his hand. But Jake wasn't interested in being a celebrity. He'd done what he did because it was right, not for recognition. After a few days, he stopped doing interviews and focused on preparing for his return to duty. On the 5th day, he received a message through the civilian communication network. It was text only, no video. The translation software marked it as Vakari in origin. Lieutenant Morrison, this is Commander Silith. I hope this message finds you well. Kira asks about you often. She misses Jaka. I wanted to thank you properly for what you did, for saving my daughter, for keeping your promise. If you are willing, I would like to meet before the peace talks begin. There is much we should discuss. Silith Jake read the message 3 times. Then he composed a reply, Commander Silith. I'm glad Kira is doing well. I miss her too. I'd be honored to meet with you. Tell me when and where. Jake, her response came within an hour. Coordinates for a location on Meridian Outpost. A date 1 week away, the day before the peace talks were scheduled to begin. Jake spent the next week preparing. He requisitioned civilian clothes since this wasn't a military meeting. He arranged transport to Meridian, and he tried not to think too hard about what he would say when he saw Syleth and Kira again. The week passed quickly. Jake arrived at Meridian Outpost a day early and checked into a small residential section of the station. Kate Vasquez herself came to greet him. "Welcome back, hero," she said with a smirk. "Try not to start any more incidents on my station." "I'll do my best," Jake replied. "The Vakari are already here. Seleth and her daughter, they're staying in the residential sector. Same as you. Different wing, obviously. Can't have you two meeting unsupervised before the official talks." Kate handed him a data chip. "But if you happen to go to the Garden Dome tomorrow at 0900, and if someone else happened to be there too, well..." "I can't control where people choose to walk," Jake smiled. "Thanks, Kate. Don't thank me. Just make this peace thing work. War's bad for business." The next morning, Jake made his way to the Garden Dome. It looked the same as it had weeks ago. The same alien plants, the same transparent ceiling showing stars, the same sense of being somewhere special, somewhere apart from the war. He wasn't alone. Syleth stood by a tree with silver leaves, and beside her, holding her hand, was Kira. The moment Kira saw Jake, her scales lit up brilliant yellow-green. She pulled free from her mother and ran across the garden, her small feet pattering on the pathway. "Jaka!" she shouted in pure joy. Jake knelt down and caught her as she crashed into him. She wrapped her arms around his neck, and Jake found himself laughing and crying at the same time. She was so much healthier than the last time he'd held her. Her scales were vibrant, her weight was good, her energy was boundless. "Hey, kiddo," Jake said softly. "I missed you." "Missed you too," Kira said. Her English had improved dramatically. "Mama says you're a hero." "What's a hero?" "It's someone who does good things," Jake said. "Then you're a hero. And Mama too." Kira pulled back to look at him seriously. "Why don't you live with us? Then we could all be together." Jake looked up at Syleth. She'd approached quietly, her scales showing complex emotions and patterns Jake was learning to read. Affection blue, gratitude green, and something else, something warm and uncertain. "That's a complicated question, sweetheart," Syleth said gently. "Jaka has his own home, his own life. But he could visit," Kira insisted. "Right? He could visit us?" "If he wants to," Syleth said, her eyes meeting Jake's. "I'd like that," Jake said. "If it's okay with your mom." They found a bench in the garden and sat together. Kira settled between them, chattering happily about everything she'd been doing, drawing, learning, playing with other Vakari children in the settlement where she and Syleth were temporarily staying. Eventually, Kira got distracted by some glowing flowers and wandered off to examine them, leaving Jake and Syleth alone. "She seems happy," Jake said. "She is. Thanks to you." Syleth's scales showed gratitude blue. "The doctors say she made a full recovery. No permanent damage from the separation. You kept her alive long enough. You would have done the same for a human child." Syleth was quiet for a moment. "Before all this, I would have said no. I would have said humans were the enemy, all of them. But you changed that. You showed me that honor and compassion exist on both sides of this war. I just did what anyone should do, but most wouldn't. That's what makes it matter." Syleth turned to face him fully. "I wanted to ask you something. The peace talks begin tomorrow. They will be difficult. Both sides have much anger, much pain, but they need voices of reason. People who understand both sides. I was wondering if you would be willing to work together during these talks, to show them that cooperation is possible." Jake considered this. "You want us to be symbols. I want us to be examples. Not symbols. Symbols are abstract. Examples are real." Syleth's scales showed determination orange. "We proved enemies can work together when something matters enough. Let us prove it again." "Okay," Jake agreed. "Let's do it." The peace talks began the next day in Meridian's largest conference hall. The room was divided carefully. Human delegation on one side, Vakari on the other, neutral mediators in the middle, and in the back, as observers, Jake and Syleth sat together. Their presence changed the dynamic of the room. Every time tensions rose, someone would glance back at them. Every time old hatreds threatened to derail discussions, their example sat there as a living reminder that enemies could become something else. The talks lasted 3 weeks. They were difficult, painful. Both sides had legitimate grievances. Both sides had lost too much to forgive easily. But slowly, incrementally, they made progress. A temporary ceasefire, prisoner exchanges, humanitarian corridors. Small steps. Not peace, not yet, but movement toward peace. Jake and Silith attended every session. Between sessions, they talked with delegates from both sides. Jake helped humans understand Vakari concerns. Silith helped Vakari understand human positions. They became translators not just of language but of culture and intention. Kira came to some of the sessions too. The little girl would sit quietly, drawing pictures or playing with toys. But her presence mattered. She reminded everyone what they were fighting for. Not territory or resources or pride, but the next generation, the children who would inherit whatever world they created.